While I've never been that huge on the NES, I got mine going again in my last video thanks to boiling hot water. I did that so I could give this a go. The Maxi 15 pack by HES. It's 15 games of pure, unlicensed gameplay that's compatible with something manufactured by Nintendo. I'm sure their fleet of lawyers are still salty about it. I find this concept fascinating. Nintendo enacted massive creative and financial control on what was allowed on their early consoles. For a group of developers and publishers back then to be actively flouting that is honestly a bit amusing. It was released in 1992, however, which is quite late when it came to the NES. This is possibly how HES got away with it lawsuit free. HES was an Australian distributor, but there is another version of this cartridge by AVE that those in the US might be familiar with. There are some minor variations in the menus, but the biggest difference is that this cartridge has the games Blackjack and Death Race, while the AVE version instead has the games Pyramid and Double Strike. This is supposedly down to licensing reasons. Fair warning for this video, I'm not going too in depth for every single game. This would be a mammoth video if I were to explore every facet of all 15. This is an initial thoughts, general idea sort of review, because I'm incredibly intrigued by how much this must have pissed off Nintendo. And I rightly hope it did. I mean, come on, they're basically the Apple of the gaming world, and I do not take kindly to that. So, who are HES? Well, that stands for Home Entertainment Suppliers. Based in New South Wales, which is the state where Sydney is situated if you're not from around these parts, the company was formed in 1984. They eventually became a brand called True Blue, which locals may know for Australian-based sports games. It looks like they may still be around, although there's no updates on their website or their socials beyond 2019. AVE, on the other hand, stands for American Video Entertainment. They actually released a promo video for their version, which you could purchase with only 3 simple payments of $50. Yeah, yikes. Also, Hulk Hogan.
I'm the expert at tough challenges. 30 games, 1 cartridge, what power, intense play, Maxi vision. It's incredible, dudes.
This boringly long promo also claims that there are 30 games, but that was evidently cut down to 15 by release. I'll leave a link to the full video in the description if you have no respect for your free time. Back to the world of HES, the cartridge is certainly interesting, bucking the trend of what Nintendo required from its licensees. I wondered what this extra slot was for. It turns out you plug an official NES cartridge into that, and it tricks the console into thinking it's playing a licensed game. Quite clever really. I've disabled the lockout chip in my NES, so it wasn't necessary for me to do that, but it's interesting to see what length developers and publishers would go to back in the day to get out of paying Nintendo royalties and generally being under their thumb. Loading the cartridge, and you're treated to quite a nice intro sequence. Not sure exactly what I was expecting, possibly just a plain menu like in a garden variety Famiclone console. But there are sound effects, catchy music, everyone is just having a great time. There is an interesting message before the menu, however. Basically, an inbuilt advert to swoon your friends if they come over and play the cartridge. It details in no uncertain terms what number to ring, and what exactly to ask for if you'd like to buy a copy. I'm curious how much these cost originally. I only paid $15 from a local retro gaming store, but let's hope it was less than $150 that the AVE version was originally asking before the games list was cut down. While the menu won't blow you away with its intricacies, an effort to the design has been made, and each game even gets a blurb. This is honestly a lot more than what I was expecting, so I'm at least a little bit impressed. But without further ado, let's check out the meat of the cartridge. The games. First on the list, F-15 City Wars by AVE. A fairly typical Space Harrier clone, you pilot an F-15 Strike Eagle and defend a city from an invading force. That's sadly topical. The obvious is the impressive visuals. Flying down a freeway while a bunch of tall buildings whiz by, I certainly was interested to see what this game had to offer. In the level I played, there are attacking helicopters flying at you and tanks on the ground. You can fire ahead to take out the helis and drop bombs for the tanks, although I don't think I ever successfully destroyed a tank. The perspective just makes the timing a bit awkward. Oddly, there is no HUD at all, including a running score. I guess there isn't enough video memory to go around after the 3D effect. While the graphics are cool, it is ultimately a forgettable shooter, especially with the prospect of 14 more games to try. Next! The second game on the cartridge is the imaginarily named Puzzle by AVE. In Puzzle, you puzzle. There are 8 intense picture puzzles to unscramble. The idea is that you can only move each portion around in a linear fashion. Others need to be moved in either 4 directions out of the way, and the challenge is to move them in such a way that they're in the correct order. Puzzle starts with just needing to sort the numbers 1 to 12 in order, but graduates to more detailed images like this menacing looking tiger. You do have several slots on the side to help in the sorting, and you can preview the image if you're not sure what this tiger boy actually looks like, although you can only do that 5 times. I was curious what the other 7 images are, but there's no time for that. It's time to play some blackjack. Yeah, gambling time. This was developed by Odyssey Software and is as advertised. The rules are no different here. The idea is to gain a hand of cards that equals 21, or at least less than 21 but higher than the dealer. You're afforded the luxury of controlling how much money you can start with, along with the table's limit. You can even choose to colour the cards a garish purple if you wish. Alright, let's bet the farm. These virtual gambling games are only fun if you bet everything because there's no real element of risk. So, moving on. In Tiles of Fate, the controls are somewhat baffling. I know someone will get joy out of setting me straight in the comments section, but I just couldn't figure this one out. I get the idea is to match the tiles, but there's something key about the gameplay I don't understand because it wouldn't always work consistently. I tried looking up guides or even a manual, but had no luck. So, yeah. Sorry about that one, champs. It does have quite the setup, however, with a storyline involving something twisted fate threatening China. There's also a level editor, although this wasn't very useful to me since I don't know how to play. Anyway, here's some gameplay that's shown in the menu. This is what it's supposed to look like. Next! In Crazy Creatures, and that's with 2 Ks, the backstory is something along the lines of lining up objects to ship them out. You're a part of an intergalactic transport service, you see. Not like that would be obvious if it wasn't for the blurb in the cartridge's menu, but Crazy Creatures is actually quite a fun puzzle game. Cats, dogs, elephants, snails, and a further random selection of stuff will get thrown up on screen, and it's your goal to sort them into rows to clear them off. The minimum amount per row is 3, but the more you line up, the more points you'll score. Add in a tight time limit and ever-changing levels, and you'll find quite the confident puzzler. This is probably the game I played the most out of the 15. I played quite far in, but sadly the footage corrupted. Either way, it's my favourite of the bunch. Death Race by American Games Cartridges Incorporated is basically an 8-bit Carmageddon, although sadly, the intro splash screen is probably the coolest aspect of the game. Driving feels like it's on ice, but it's based in San Diego? Nothing makes sense anymore. I failed to figure out where I was supposed to go. There are civilians running around whom you can murder, which I guess is kinda neat, but I kept getting destroyed by a rover-like orb before the time limit even ran out. I'm sure there is more to this game, but I couldn't refuse ditching it for dudes with attitude. Because with a name like that, I couldn't resist. And I mean seriously, look at this. I'm not sure what was in the water at Michael and Cam Crick's house, but they're certified trippers. According to the menu's blurb, the goal is to find a king's ransom in the catacombs of an ancient lost desert island. A new player is an emoticon with stylish glasses. It's games like this that put my own creativity into question. It is an in-depth setup, but sadly it's all for what's ultimately a run-of-the-mill puzzle platformer. It basically boils down to bouncing around the screen and collecting items in a certain order. The level select screen is pretty cool though, being a map of the island. So there probably is more of a game here to discover, but I lost interest pretty quick. Next up, Venice Beach Volleyball by AVE. The title doesn't lie. It is indeed volleyball in what's most likely a representation of Venice Beach. You can jump, move around, and you explode if you pause the game. I don't think I ever scored a point. Like in a few other games, I really struggled with the perspective. I was just never quite in the right spot to intercept the ball, much like when I try to play volleyball in real life. It's nice of the guy who whooped my ass to encourage me to never give up, however. Thanks, mate. Stakk'm was never released anywhere else if the internet is to be believed. It only exists on this and AVE's cartridge. Not like the greater world is missing out on much, however, it's just a Tetris derivative. Instead of the shapes of Tetris, there are simple cubes with numbers and symbols on them. The idea is still to line them up, horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, but the fact that they're individual cubes kinda just takes the fun out of it. So, while it is interesting that this game is not found anywhere else, it still doesn't make it good. Alright, Deathbots. This ambitious game by Odyssey Software has quite a cool intro screen. They also post their PO box too, which is interesting. I wonder what they expected people to send them. It also specifically mentions that this is the NES version. A bit of digging shows that this was also released on the Amiga. In Deathbots, you run around ensuring they're dead bots. This is to save the human race, naturally. While the perspective makes it a bit tricky to walk through some doors, it is actually quite fun to run around blowing up robots. Scattered throughout the map are several types of weapon and health. These are accessed by an inventory system, which I thought was pretty cool. The only downside is that you can't really defend yourself against the projectiles. Generally, the rooms are small enough that you can't just duck out of the way, but you'll usually get swarmed by enough baddies that it's pretty fruitless anyway. Luckily, the game is quite generous with health and lives, so it's not too hard to gain progression. All in all, one of the highlights of the cartridge. Rad Racket Deluxe Tennis 2, gee, that's a bit of a mouthful, was also supposedly never released anywhere else. Like volleyball, I did struggle with the perspective, but not to the same extent. I don't think I won any games, but I was at least able to score. Otherwise, this is a pretty run-of-the-mill 8-bit tennis game, although there is a rat. You can even hit the rat with a ball, probably to the umpire's delight. There's also an advert for dudes with attitude, although I'm not sure if the tame tennis crowd is quite ready for that. Closing into the last few games now, and we have Chiller by American Game Cartridges Incorporated. This light gun game is spoopy, which means it's so spooky you might go a little bit poopy. I don't own a light gun for the NES, although you can use the gamepad. It's pretty lame with the pad though, although I'm not sure if it would be any less lame with a gun. I don't think there is more to this game than this single screen. It is, however, more fun than Solitaire. Yep, it's Solitaire. Including graphics that are remarkably similar to the Blackjack game, it's a fully functional representation of everyone's dad's favourite card game. I don't really know how to play, and honestly, don't really have any intention of learning either. So there's not much else to say. Moving on. Next, we have Menace Speech by Vance Kozik and Nina. No surname there, just Nina. So, skateboard dude's girlfriend has been kidnapped. It's up to you to roll around, do a few ollies, and save the day. The gameplay sort of reminds me of Bart's Nightmare a bit, which isn't a good thing. The graphics are good, so great work Nina, but the controls are a bit slippy. Not too surprising considering you're on a skateboard, but it does make it difficult to land attacks. There are all sorts of enemies like ninjas and Elvis, but I didn't get too far in since I turned off a light switch and couldn't see anything. So Menace Speech at least gets points for realism. I'm sure there is more to this game, but I'm honestly just not that interested. Lastly, we have Shockwave by American Game Cartridges. Frankly, this was a delightful way to finish off the cartridge. It controls like Drop Zone, but it's a puzzler instead. The aim is to fly around, collecting what's referred to as power crystals. While you can shoot your way to some, others are hidden behind blocks that move in random ways. I never quite figured out what makes them tick, but I'd be more than happy to give this a more in-depth play. I love games like this. And with that, there are no more games to play. This, Crazy Creatures and Deathbots are definitely the highlights. While there is definitely some filler here, like the card games, props to HES and AVE for releasing such a diverse range of genres on a single cartridge. It's quite common too. The shop I bought this from actually had a stack of them, so I was able to pick and choose the one that was in the best condition. I'm amazed the distributors didn't get attacked by Nintendo's roaming pack of lawyers. But anyway, that concludes my look into the world of unlicensed NES games. It almost feels a bit naughty. If you have any recommendations for similar stuff, please let me know. For now, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.